This is the Shadow Talk Radio Network.
Shadow Talk.
The following views and opinions do not necessarily represent those of the Shadow Talk Radio Network, its management, staff, or any affiliates.
Do you own a business? Or you plan that big event? Then come advertise the Shadow Talk Radio Network. We have many affordable advertising packages to fit your needs. Just contact Joel Sturgis at joel@shadowtalkradio.com or call 218-305-4676. Again, the number is 218-305-4676.
UFO studies, ancient mysteries, paranormal studies, cryptozoological sciences, demonology, extraterrestrial archaeology, temporal sciences, conspiratorial studies. These courses and more can be found at the Institute of Metaphysics. From the mysteries, knowledge. instituteofmetaphysics.com.
From the beautiful city of Atlanta in the Empire State of the South, welcome to Dimension X, ladies and gentlemen, your weekly foray into the paranormal and the unexplained. I am your host, Dr. William Lester, and I thank you for joining me on this excursion into the unknown. I want to remind you that this show can be heard each Saturday from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time right here on the Shadow Talk Radio Network. Hope everyone's bundled up. The nation has been gripped in a winter blast. Even here in the ATL, last couple of days, it has been outrageous. Got into my car the other day and looked on the dashboard thermometer, and it read 4. And I said, I didn't even know that this device was capable of registering a 1-digit measurement. But we even had a little freezing rain this evening, and of course, the folks in the northern parts of the country are getting it far, far worse. But when it's 4 degrees in Atlanta, Georgia, folks, we have some stuff going on. Before I get to my guest for the evening, I wanted to get back to our regular top of the show installment of Today in History with a few tidbits, and I'll just kind of go down the little list I made this week. First up, today in 1706, we have the birth of the statesman and, of course, tremendous inventor, Benjamin Franklin, born today in the city of Boston. In 1893, the Rutherford B. Hayes, 19th President of the United States, died in Fremont, Ohio, at the age of 70. In 1899, on this day, the famous gangster Al Capone was born in Brooklyn, New York. Today in 1946, the United Nations Security Council held its first meeting. Now, here's an interesting one because it touches on many areas that we discuss on this program. On this day in 1961, during his farewell address, President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned against the rise of, can you guess? The military-industrial complex. Wow. On this day in 1995, a magnitude 7.2 earthquake devastated the city of Kobe, Japan, killing more than 6,000 people. On this day in 1998, President Bill Clinton became the first U.S. as a defendant in a criminal or civil suit when he answered questions from lawyers for Paula Jones, who accused Clinton of sexual harassment. And on this day, 1 year ago, Bobby Fischer, the chess master who became a Cold War icon when he dethroned the Soviet Union's Boris Spassky as world champion in 1972, died at the age of 64. And that concludes this installment of Today in History. So let's move on. I'm going to bring on a gentleman who, by my reading, is an expert in an area of ufology that is profoundly interesting. and it's a kind of a subset or a subsection of ufology that is that doesn't get a lot of play, and that means we need to bring it front and center here on Dimension X. But this gentleman, Mr. Carl Feindt, telling you a little bit about him, acted as a cadet in the Civil Air Patrol. He was attended the Academy of Aeronautics, served 2 years in the United States Air Force, and did UFO research and uncovered approximately 750 UFO-related news articles in the state of Delaware. And that's interesting for several reasons, but one is that Delaware, of course, is the second smallest state in the country. What in the world is going on in Delaware? Mr. Carl Fine, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
How you doing?
Unfortunately, nothing in the way of UFOs.
Okay. So,
newspaper articles I did cover events in Delaware, but the majority was really out of state.
okay.
Not carried in the local newspaper.
Okay. So, apparently, but there still is a disproportionate number of sightings in Delaware. Is that true or no?
Well, I'd say we don't have any nuclear reactors or anything that seems to attract them, but I do get them. I do get reports. I did one just recently in near Dover, not quite too close to Dover, but nearby.
You know, I have seen here and there over the years these various UFO documentaries on TV, and I can only think of one or two instances when they discussed the subject of UFOs underwater. And I find it a wildly fascinating angle to ufology. How did you get to that part of the research? Did you start out just researching UFOs in general, or what was it?
Well, no, I started reading in the early 60s. I, of course, encountered UFOs when I was 14 years old. They were flying over the White House restricted airspace for 2 weeks, a 2-week end, I should say. In any event, that caught my interest, and then as I went along after school, I started picking up books on UFOs, which started coming out at that point. And the thing that kind of shocked me was the reason for the water part was that in all these books they're talking about UFOs in the skies, UFOs landing on land, and this, that, and the other thing. And then they'd have one case about water, and it was like, here it is, and now on to the next one. And it was like dismissed. And I'm saying, an aircraft goes into the water. We just had an event on the Hudson River, as a matter of fact. You know about that Allegheny flight.
Yes.
And it tears the airplane apart, you know. Well, it didn't do too bad on that one. But normally it sinks, and the engines can't function, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, it was amazing to have a craft that came out of the water. Engines don't, our aircraft engines don't function underwater. And to go into water at speed would rip anybody apart, including the aircraft, you know. It's like going into concrete. So to me, it was, why are they passing up this very important part of ufology? Well, of course, you're going to school, work, family, this, that, and the other thing, so you don't get back to it. I retired, and I did the research, the newspaper research, but I had only 2 days a week on that where I could get free parking. And then after that, I said, well, I got 5 days a week, and instead of Geraldo and all the other things, I said I could be doing something else. So I said, well, it's a perfect time to get into the water thing. So my one book is by Ivan T. Sanderson, and it's called Invisible Residents. And in his book, he had 262 cases. It was very well referenced, and I used his references. Of course, now I'm up to 1,150 cases, so I've kind of passed him a little bit. But in any event, as I started going along, I started discovering more and more things that these craft were doing in water, and how they affected water. So to me, it's become my primary function. I'm really bored with regular UFOs. I really only function with water now.
Well, yeah, and that leads me to a statement and then another question.
Hmm.
I talk to UFO researchers, and we always jokingly, kind of say, well, I guess we're past the conversation about whether or not UFOs are real,
Hmm.
uh, because like you said, you've gotten bored with UFOs flying overhead,
Hmm.
and so we're looking at them underwater, and it might seem a little bit bizarre to a person who doesn't give UFOs a second thought.
Hmm.
But what I want to start off with is the physics of this.
Hmm.
Because as we've seen recently, and of course in past incidents, what happens when one of our aircraft strike the water? What are the physics of this? If we make the assumption that some UFOs are extraterrestrial vehicles,
Hmm.
we assume that they have a level of technology which allows them to traverse space in a way that we just don't quite understand. And so do we extrapolate then that the same holds true for the ability to enter and exit and navigate underwater? Tell us about the physics of this.
Okay. Generally, I mean, the thing with UFOs is the only time they're seen with any part of their field, you might say, is at night, because the sunlight destroys the colors of the thing, and you don't see the UFO at night. What you
Hmm.
normally see is a ball of light
Hmm.
or a glowing object anyway. So most of the time, if it's daylight, you just see a craft.
Hmm.
And so there's very little in the atmosphere that you can tell about a UFO at extreme speeds, right angle turns. Of course, you can say that about at nighttime too, because they seem to do the same thing at night, except they're a ball of light. With water, this was really my ball field now, because I really picked this up. Uh, I started getting cases that were repeating. And of course, in science, that's the main ingredient. If something happens over and over and over again, then it must have a cause.
Hmm.
So I started getting these groups, but it was driving me bats, because I had 4 groups of types of cases, and I had no way of connecting them. Every time I put a case up on the website, I'm saying, why can't I find something that makes it, you know, uh, through the 4 groups that I had?
Hmm.
And so one day I just finally gave up the ghost. I went to my drafting board, which I still had from school, and I said, I'm going to draw. Maybe if I can see it visually, it might do something.
Hmm.
Well, that's what happened. After I finished the first one, I said, yes, this thing works that way, but it doesn't mean it's going to work the same way for the rest of them. Well, then as I kept going, every time I did the next group, which was higher, higher, and higher, uh, uh, things it just stayed right. The physics of it, the rotation of the field, which is something else I guess I kind of found, um, explained the physical reason why the water cases in each group were doing what they were doing.
Hmm.
So now I got a prize for second place, actually, for best physical evidence in the MUFON symposium in
Hmm.
2006. And
Well,
I'm sorry, go
the,
ahead.
no, I'm glad you touched on that, and I'm glad that you talked about the repetition
Hmm.
in science, because this is one of these areas, and I'd like you to address it. This is one of these areas from the debunker community that absolutely drives me up the wall.
Hmm.
What you regularly hear is that, well, number one, there is no quote evidence for the existence of UFOs. And one of the reasons, of course, is that, according to the scientific model, that, there is no, it can't be repeated in a controlled environment, la, 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 la.
Hmm.
Uh, and that, secondly, that eyewitness testimony is not a credible standard upon which research can be based. So, how would you,
It's not credible unless you're in courtroom testifying against somebody else for their lives, right?
well,
Then
absolutely.
all of a
So,
sudden they're
yeah,
credible.
exactly. So, yeah, I mean, so is that part of how you would rebut that charge? Because you're a UFO researcher, you must hear this all the time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It becomes very annoying because evidently you get well, there's been several on TV, and
mhm,
once you get these skeptics on, it's like, oh, the guys must have been drunk or they were doing drugs, or there's no saying the guy's an honest man, hardworking, never believed in UFOs, and he was shocked. And they have no explanation for why he was shocked by this event that took place, but then they come out with this nonsense of some kind of abuse or mentally retarded or whatever. They just throw it out. They
mhm,
don't come up. They want us to give proof, but they won't give proof of their charges.
mhm,
And I hate that. I really hate it. Because these people that are doing these testimonies on these various cases that, like I've listed in column A, column B, whatever, uh, they're all normal and sometimes exceptional people.
mhm.
So you can't disregard these people. And they're all coming up with the same stories no matter what field of occupation they're in. And they're valid. They're valid.
And as I've said before, when it comes to UFOs, and well, quite frankly, with many other types of unexplained phenomena, this evidence is cumulative,
Hmm.
and it's kind of stacked up on us, over the years, and I don't see a way at this point how you can. I mean, it's fair to say we don't know what the UFO enigma is all about. Now, that's fair, but I think
Right.
it's absurd to say that it's not happening.
Right.
You know, and yet there are people in the skeptic slash debunker community who still to this day, and again, they make their regular appearances on these programs, that still maintain that you know it doesn't matter if you have military personnel, it doesn't matter if you have policemen, it doesn't matter if you have firemen, doctors, teachers, lawyers, it doesn't matter how upstanding the citizen is,
Hmm.
what they're describing can't be true because UFOs don't exist.
Exactly.
And
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 there are
so
plenty
where's the
anyway.
science?
Well, the thing is, what they want us to do is walk in the courtroom with a UFO, in our hand, not in our hands, but
Hmm.
wheeling one in, I guess, and
Hmm.
saying, "Oh, here it is," But
Hmm.
these guys aren't like our technology, falling apart all over the place half the time.
Hmm.
And they travel space, and you don't break down in the middle of space and expect to come back. So their crafts are extremely high technology, and we just are too far below them to comprehend it. But yet we're getting the same kind of mental attacks. That
Hmm.
they have to fall apart somewhere. There has to be a tailpipe off of one of these things, and it ain't true. It isn't true. It isn't true.
I once heard a debunker say, and he was referencing, this isn't an underwater case. He was referencing Roswell, but I think it makes the point.
Hmm.
Uh, the reason he did not quote believe in Roswell, and I find that just a humorous statement by itself.
Hmm.
Uh, the reason he didn't believe in Roswell is because, of course, Roswell involved a crashed UFO,
Hmm.
and his logic was, if someone had the technology to come here from wherever, then certainly the idea of a crash is absurd. And this was his basis for not believing in Roswell. And, my thinking was, even advanced technology is technology. And because in any technology, no matter how advanced, is subject to accident.
Well, that's true, and what they encounter. The thing with
Mhm.
a lot of the early UFO, and there evidently were a lot of early crashes, according to some people. And the thing is, they come into our atmosphere with our technology, and there
Mhm.
might be something weird, like radar. I think that's the main cause that they say,
Oh,
knocks out
yes.
some of the things. and they weren't equipped for this. So next thing you know, they're bouncing around and crashing and so forth. But this is an effect of the technology they weren't equipped to deal with. So, I mean, yes, they can encounter something. They might not on a normal planet that doesn't have a life form with any technology. But when it comes here, we're dealing with science and so forth, and we seem to have affected them somehow.
Okay.
But,
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's perfectly reasonable. It's not as if these things are crashing and just falling out of the sky. I mean, we have
no.
just a small number of cases, and
Exactly.
if you say that we've been visited thousands of times, perhaps millions of times, because I'm sure that there are visitations that we're not aware of,
Almost daily.
and what exactly, and so the percentage of mishaps is just almost negligible. So it makes perfect sense. What are I was up on your website, and by the way, folks, that is waterufo.net, where you folks can go up and read about all of this fascinating research. I was just up on your website, and just making some notes about some of the kind of major areas I wanted to touch on, and one of the at the top of my list was just kind of a description on your part by some of the major water UFO sightings or incidents that you wanted to talk with the public about.
Okay, if I can, I just want to divert there while I have this thought in my mind, though.
Sure, sure.
We were talking about evidence before, right?
Uh-huh.
We don't have a crash source. If anybody has it, government has it. They've cleaned it up.
Sure.
But it doesn't matter. Our problem is that they say, "Oh, well, bring us instrumentation." Well, needless to say, the UFO pilots don't give us their flight schedules. So you can't lug a bunch of instruments to a site and say, "Okay, it's landing right here. So now we'll get all this measurements and information off of the equipment." It doesn't work that way. We have to, somebody's shocked out of their pants by something that lands next to them or hovers over them or does whatever. And so we don't have the ability to get this type of information. However, water and the Air Force, in both realms, Navy, Air Force, we have sonar, we have radar, and we, ufologists, don't have access to that data. Now, I've run quite a few of my things. I have aircraft carriers and other large ships on my website, and I keep getting these reports about guys that said the carrier picked it up on its sonar, or radar. It was flying above the carrier, and I have one case where it was above the carrier, picked up on radar. They lost it as it went into the water, and then sonar picked it up. Now, those are instruments, scientific instruments, but we don't have access to them. Now, of course, needless to say, the Air Force and the Navy aren't giving out this information. They're not coming out to the media and saying, guess what we have? Look at the data that we received on our instruments. So, in other words, we're still in the black curtain. Nobody talks to us.
Well, you know what, though? I just recently came to this realization. It was probably a little dense on my part for it to take this long. But the skeptics community knows that. The skeptics community knows that the type of data that they would accept is being held by government agencies. They are, and which is why I think they demonstrate such a cavalier, smug attitude. They know that you, as a researcher, can make a claim and you can postulate theories, but they know that you're probably not going to get your hands on the evidence that would that would compel them to acknowledge the UFO reality. Have you ever thought about that? I think they're well aware.
True. Well, I mean, the whole idea is the minute that we went, it would go to the government to say, hey, listen, we need the radar tapes, or we need the affidavit from whoever took the data down. They come along and say, oh, no, we can't give that out because it's secret information. And you're blocked by the secrecy veil all the time. Now, I've also got, this was like, I'm writing a book, and I stumbled across this. I started putting, I have a search engine on my website, and if you put in certain words, it gives you all the cases that has that word in it. Well, don't talk, be quiet, secret, anything like that. Bang, it gives you all the cases that have it. And it's always in the case of the Navy saying that to the people on the ship, either the individuals who experienced it or the whole crew in some cases. You know, it's broadcast over the PA system. So it's almost like a foregone conclusion that if you see one on a ship, you're going to be hushed up. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and so, you know, it's as a UFO researcher, you know, you're actually fighting a battle on several fronts. I mean, you're fighting the phenomena itself. You're fighting the press because, you know, they are basically enabling the cover up and the skepticism, and of course, you're fighting the debunkers. And yet, through all of that, we are still able to, you know, muster up this incredible body of evidence. And here's another kind of scenario that I thought about, and I want to get your reaction to it. All of the media people who kind of, you know, look at this and kind of chuckle and you know, do their little cutesy stories, and all the debunkers and the you know, the academic types. What is going to be their reaction, in your opinion, on the day, you know, on the day when this becomes unambiguous and publicly and a publicly acknowledged reality? What do you think they're going to do or say?
Well, in another time, I would have said, you know, the press are absolutely ridiculous. The trouble is, though, I think the press is actually starting to swing our way.
Well, yeah, no, they're coming along.
You remember the Chicago sighting last year? Or,
O'Hare.
Yeah, and that was brought out by a reporter on the Chicago Tribune. And they went nuts trying to get all the witnesses and everything else together on that. They had United Airline pilots, they had ground crew, they had witnesses in the terminal and so forth that saw this thing. And MUFON did a heck of a case on the thing. They did a field investigation there. But and of course they did the one down in Texas where a whole lot of witnesses. But the thing is, the press in both. As a matter of fact, that was it, Stephenville, Texas.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a newspaper reporter who brought that to light and went nuts about it. And I think the newspaper wasn't too happy about it at the time, but the reporter brought it out. And more reporters are putting clips in the newspaper. There's a website on you can go to. It's called UFO Updates. And 9 times out of 10, the stuff they have on there are from newspapers in a local area that had something occur, and the newspaper is actually reporting it. Now, in the old days, they said it's just kind of fill. If you have nothing else, you stick it in there. Otherwise, you leave it out. But I think the news media is starting to come to realize that there is something going on. My thing is, with my website, you can put any country into that search engine, and you will find cases for every country in the world. I don't have China because of the, you know, I can't get translations on that. I have Russia, I have Italy, France, Germany, you name the country, and it's in there somewhere.
Well, it's amazing, and you know what, the press is slowly coming along. We are obviously, the national big media corporations are going to be the last, and I think they'll come along kicking and screaming. But eventually, you know, they're usually the last to see the writing on the wall. We're coming up to our half-hour break, so we're going to just take about a 5-minute time out to hear from our sponsors and a little bit of music. So, ladies and gentlemen, my guest is Mr. Carl Feindt. His website is www.waterufo.net. And you're listening to Dimension X on the Shadow Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back at you.
Off you go.
Have you been wondering what gift to get that special person in your life? Then you need to visit Mountain View Candle Works, your one-stop headquarters for candles, fountains, specialty foods, and much more. Just visit www.mountainviewcandleworks.com. We make your candles with mountain care.
Hi, Michael Old Hip Johnson, Paranormal Outsider, here with a question. Are you a fan of ghost, history, horror writers, mediums, TV celebrities, demonologists, and EVP specialists? What would you give or do to meet and greet top TV celebrities such as Chris Fleming, Patrick Burns, Chip Coffey, Tiffany Johnson, Dave Schrader, John Zaffis, the cast of Scared TV, Adam Bly, Barry Taft, Stacey Jones, the Constantinos, Scotty Roberts, Vince Wilson. Well, before you give up on that new piece of investigative hardware, check out Northeastern Paranormal Investigations Phenomenology 101, March 26th through the 28th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. This 3-day event includes a reception to meet and greet the celebrities, lectures, vendors. Limited tickets are available for investigations of 3 haunted locations in Gettysburg you won't want to miss. Still not convinced? What if I told you we have gotten special rates for the Eisenhower Hotel in historic Gettysburg located on the 3rd day battlefield? Go to www.northeasternparanormal.org for all the ticket information and tell them Old Hip sent you.
Did you hear that? Do you believe? You will. Don't miss ShadowCon, coming March 27, 2009, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, hosted by the Kentucky Shadow Chasers. Meet Shannon Sylvia, Keith Age, Brian Harnois, and many others as we explore the world of the supernatural and the paranormal. It's an event you'll never forget, including an investigation into the Mothman at Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's coming March 27th, 2009. ShadowCon, hosted by the Kentucky Shadow Chasers. You will believe.
Trying not to say, what are you gonna do when I give my
This is Dimension X Radio with your host, Dr. William Lester, live from Atlanta, Georgia, on the Shadow Talk Radio Network.
And we are back on Dimension X, and my guest tonight is Mr. Carl Feindt, and we are talking about, believe it or not, underwater UFOs. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the UFOs flying overhead, traversing our skies. We've done a lot of that in the past couple of weeks, but now we need to take it beneath the waves. When we went into the break, we were talking about how the press inexplicably seems to be slowly coming along. And we referenced the Stephenville, Texas case and the Chicago O'Hare case, and how they're really landmark cases in as much as that they got significant press attention and, well, frankly, significant, legitimate, serious press attention, no giggles, no charges of crackpot sightings, etc. So there is hope on that front. And of course, as I stated, the mainstream media, the CNNs of the world, will probably have to be chained and gagged and brought kicking and screaming along. And I think that though it is a sign of hope and a sign to be optimistic for UFO research to slowly get the press as an ally. So one of the things I saw on your site, Mr. Feindt, is the topic of Blue Book. Now, we all know, or people who follow ufology are well aware that Blue Book was the storefront UFO program that the Air Force put up, and it was really a public relations. I think it was staffed by like 3 people.
I think four. One
yeah,
was a
3 or 4
major,
people.
a sergeant, and I think 2 secretaries.
Right. So in reality, they weren't. Blue Book was not serious.
No, it was PR. As a matter of fact, a lot of ufologists can tell you that there were cases that they found extraordinary and should be in Blue Book, but never made Blue Book. They only went through the back door to whoever was interested in the cases in the service. Most of the stuff they had, and then they were under so much pressure that a lot of the cases they attached bizarre reasons for. Venus, of course, pops up all the time, and no doubt Venus does cause some UFO sightings. Mm-hmm. But they just had to slap something down on a piece of paper to get rid of it, because they wanted the statistics to look small, and they succeeded. Unfortunately, though, some of the other ufologists I know of have gone back to these old cases where we finally got the tapes on it, and they were able to disprove a lot of the sighting reasons as being, natural. It had to be a UFO in most of the cases, and the percentage they gave for the sightings went way up instead of down. So
wasn't it something? I hope I'm not throwing out an erroneous number here, but wasn't it something like 20% of these cases turned actually out to be unexplained? They said it was something like 3, and then it turned out to be a much more significant number or percentage of unexplained cases.
Well, I'd hate to go into the Blue Book statistics, but I can give you another avenue that's even more. That's in writing, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. The Condren Report. It's not called the Condren Report. It's I forget the title, but it's the scientific study of UFOs or something like that. I read the book, 969 pages, I think, almost 1,000 pages long. And that was done by the scientists of the University of Colorado. Condon was a respected physicist, but he never got into the research. He used to like to go to the carnivals and, UFO crazy people going doing things, and he got a kick out of that stuff. But the scientists at the university picked up the cases that were given to them by UFO researchers, and the funny part is that Condon has, at the beginning of the book, the fact that, there's no use in studying UFOs anymore. They give us no scientific information. The funny part is that the scientists at the University of Colorado came up with 1/3 of the cases were unexplainable. 1/3 of the cases. So if you pick up the book, there's a whole lot of cases in that book. 1/3 of them unexplainable, only as UFOs. So 33% of scientific studied cases, and they couldn't explain them. That's the one I like.
Well, let me backtrack a little bit to Condon's remarks here.
Okay.
I don't understand. Okay, so he's saying don't study UFOs because UFOs don't give us any scientific information. But how can you get scientific information unless you study them?
Exactly. Well, he came up with a biased opinion right at the beginning of the book. You don't put your opinion at the beginning of the book. You put your opinion at the end of the book. In any event, he came right at the beginning saying there's no sense in studying. So every scientist around the world, they knew, like I say, Condon was a noted physicist, a nuclear physicist. And so they said, well, if this guy thinks it's a waste of time, why bother reading the rest of the book? Well, unfortunately, like I said, I read the whole book, and many other ufologists had done the same thing. We were all disgusted by the fact that this thing was a whitewash job to keep it away from the public. The book is still available, I'm sure. Huh?
Wasn't that really the objective of the report in the first place to turn off the scientific community to say, oh, okay, Condon said it's nonsense, so let's just move on?
Yeah, the government paid for the study, of course, and it wasn't the Academy of Sciences or anything like that. It was the federal government sponsoring this thing, and I sure Condon got his marching orders, and he just wasn't thrilled with the thing anyway. So he just played it, as he did. He let the scientists do their thing, and the scientists have their cases in the book. And of course, they have their like I said, 2/3 of them. 2/3 of them were what they call a natural phenomenon, or one thing or another, or misconceptions or whatever. But 1/3 unexplained. So he didn't even listen to his own scientists.
The government should sell a package of these, a series of these reports, and they should package them like the Condon report, the Warren Commission report, the Roswell case closed report, and the 9/11 Commission. They should package all of those up and sell them to the public. Because that is the relative credibility of these government-sponsored reports, where they have this predetermined result before the investigation begins.
Right. Well, the thing with the Roswell thing, case closed. They papered that thing all over too.
Right.
I hate Roswell because. I'm on the borderline. I'm pro Roswell, but. It's a waste of time. All we have.
I agree.
There's a guy, Tom Carey, who's in northern Pennsylvania here. He goes and researches that thing. He did have a very good book recently that he put out with Schmidt. And I asked him when he was at one of the meetings, and I said, how many witnesses are total? I heard 400 from some guy who's putting on a TV show. But he says 600 witnesses. Now, that's not first-hand witnesses. That's second, third. The wife of the pilot or this, that, and the other thing. But 600 witnesses in a court case? If you had a court case going, we would win. But, what's the sense of fighting it? Because it doesn't gain us any more knowledge about UFOs per se. And if
Right.
they've got it locked up somewhere, they've got it locked up. It's like the SR-71 or something. Nobody knew about that until they finally admitted it.
Well, I think it's a, the analogy I like to use is the field goal kicker analogy. And that is, you can take the greatest field goal kicker of all time, whoever that is,
Mm-hmm.
and watch his percentage plunge if you move the goalpost whenever he kicks. You see, and and that's what they do. I mean, they move the goalpost, and so you do research because you must, and it's a totally worthwhile effort. But they do a report and they release it to the media, and the media says, "Oh, okay. According to this Air Force study, this was a satellite or weather balloon. God, I hate to fall back on weather balloons, but some other equally absurd, explanation." And then they go on the air and say, you remember that UFO flap over there? Well, according to government sources, it was nothing other than a weather vane or whatever. And so the goalposts have been moved. But in reality, uh, the evidence, I believe, that has been accumulated over the last 50 years by UFO researchers who are funding their research out of their own pocket, may I add, have I felt compiled a startlingly convincing case for the reality of UFOs.
I can give you
go ahead.
a
I'm
very
sorry.
good example of that, as a matter of fact. A friend of mine, Keith Chester, he lives down in Maryland, just the next state down. And for 4 years, he was writing a book on Foo Fighters. Okay, you know what Foo Fighters are, right?
World War II.
World War II. In
Yes.
any event, he became depressed several times because he felt he wasn't getting anywhere or nobody was interested in this, that, and the other thing. So I kept beating him on the head. I said, "You got a perfect avenue." I said, "Nobody's touched the damn thing." I said, "You get out there and do it." So anyway, he did. He finally finished and got the book. It's called Strange Company. And the thing that once you read this book, you've got case after case, Pacific, Europe, Atlantic Ocean, I should say, and the battle fronts. And pilots are seeing them all over the place, ships are seeing them all over the place. And I said, for crying out loud, I said, they knew about UFOs during World War II. That was their introduction, if anything. Because everybody's being debriefed after they come back from a combat, right? And when they're being debriefed, they write a report that goes up the ladder. Then the next guy up there, the sergeant, then up to the lieutenant, then up to the major, and then up to the generals. They knew something was going on over the world, Pacific, Atlantic, like I said, both fronts. And next thing you know, he's got in his book, that's the only thing he left out is they were geared for UFOs long before Roswell because they knew about it. And when Roswell came down, they sent everything down to nail it and lock it up. So that's what a lot of people are missing out is the fact that the top part of the command knew about this thing and they wanted to craft.
Well, I have a quick Foo Fighter story here that perfectly substantiates what you just said. Several years ago, I attended a book signing from one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, and in a very random, or perhaps not so random, fit of insight, I asked him, "What do you know about the Foo Fighters?" And it startled him. And he looked at me for a second, and he said, plain as day, he said, "Look, I don't want to talk about this, but we saw them all the time." And that's all he said. He said, "We saw them all the time." And of course, this was pre-Roswell. 1943, 1944, etc. So, that means to me, of course, if these pilots were seeing them, that means that the people in the upper echelon, the people up in command, were well aware of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I told Keith, I said, you got to do it, because nobody is getting this information. In my newspaper research that I was doing, I came across one article in 1945, after the war was over. They said this particular fighter pilot was giving out information about his Foo Fighter experience. He says he tried to outmaneuver it and speed past it and everything else. He says it just hung on his wingtip all the way down. No matter what he did, he couldn't shake it. And he was describing it as a silver disc, et cetera, et cetera. So I sent that to Keith. But, that's not the only. Keith went to veterans hospitals. He went to the National Archives and went into the battle reports and all this stuff. That's a hell of a book. But in any event, they like I said, the command topside knows about these things, and long before Roswell. So they were prepared for it. This was no surprise to them, I'm sure.
And it's ironic because the popular perception is that Roswell represents the kind of signature moment in which the military is confronted, with the UFO enigma, when in fact that's really not the case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's their board to buffer against. They just keep bringing up Roswell, or letting us bring it up, actually, and make us look like idiots, But the thing is, it's real. It's just that they keep coming up with one kind of an excuse after another that doesn't fit anything. I mean, you've got Jesse Marcel, 509 atomic aircraft, the delivery system for atomic bombs, and Jesse Marcel is the intelligence officer in the base. Now, he comes up and says, this is, strange material. And they said, no, it was a weather balloon. And he says, okay, yes, I have to say it's a weather balloon. Who was it? The guy who did the PR on the base and the commanding officers, you figure they both came out and said it was a UFO. Now, the Air Force comes along and says, no, it's a weather balloon. So the two guys in command, you consider them idiots because they couldn't determine a UFO from a weather balloon. And both of these guys were promoted.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, one went to the chief of staff. So you're going to tell me you're promoting people who don't know what they're talking about?
Well,
what kind of a gratuity to them to say what they said, and bow and let the thing go.
Well, what are the odds? What are the odds that the intelligence officer on the base of the most elite bomb wing on the planet would casually misidentify a piece of his own equipment? I say the odds are zero.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this.
He reneged on that later on.
Of course.
80, 88, somewhere there. He said, no, what I saw was a spacecraft.
But you know what? You don't even have to go that far. All you have to do is every UFO researchers are well familiar with the famous photograph of him in the office, bent over or on his knee, holding the debris of the actual weather balloon.
Yeah,
all you have to do
smiling.
is look at the expression on his face, and the expression on his face is saying, "What the hell's going on here?"
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: I think that up till so far they've given us 4 or 5 official explanations where they've literally gone back and said, first it was a flying saucer. Oh no, it was a radar target. Oh no, it was a weather balloon. Oh no, it was crash test dummies. Aren't they really telling you? Aren't they really saying, "Come on, y'all. That we're pulling your leg by giving you 4 or 5 explanations. You do understand we're kidding." I mean, aren't they saying that in a way?
They're not kidding. They're just hoping that the press pulls it in like they did originally. 52. I'm not doing water tonight, evidently. The 52. I was 14 years old, and they had that episode with 2 weekends. I have the paper clips downstairs from the Delaware papers. I was in New York City at the time, but they came out with the thing that UFOs were flying over the restricted airspace in Washington, D.C. 2 weekends. Now, the fighter base that protects Washington D.C. Was up here in Delaware at the what is now the Newcastle County Airport, and they were here, and they were called down to Washington to intercept these lights in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turned out as soon as they popped up on the radar, the UFOs went off the radar. Well, they could. In those days, the fuel wasn't very good. It burned too fast, and they had to go back to Wilmington, Delaware. Well, as soon as they left the area, the UFOs were back on the screen again. Well, one guy actually got up there, and he had 6 of these lights surrounding him, and he calls the tower and says, "What do you want me to do?" Well, it turns out everybody was. They had this other guy. I forget his name. Starts with an M, but he was a professor, and he says, "Oh, it was all caused by temperature inversion."
Of course.
Lights on the ground were beaming up and looking like they were in the sky or something like that. Well, it turns out this guy, the press bought it and walked away with this explanation. That's one scientist. Well, it turns out later on the newspapers had an article way in the back somewhere said from the Weather Bureau said that there was no such thing as a temperature inversion that would have caused what this fighter pilot saw in the sky. He says it couldn't have happened. It was too minuscule. So he says the scientific explanation bought by the press, and then even by our own federal government, the Weather Bureau comes along and says no, it couldn't have happened. Which goes back to the Stephenville case, which is just last year, or this year, I forget when it happened. But in any event, the guys were real smart. What they did, they went through the back door. They didn't go to the FAA and ask them for the tapes. They went to the Weather Bureau people and got the tapes from the Weather Bureau people. And bang, there's the UFO on the Weather Bureau tapes.
Jeez.
I love this game. It's so much fun.
Well, we do want to get back into the discussion of underwater UFOs, but anytime you start this discussion on UFOs, you inevitably have to do some commentary on Roswell, and of course, the Stephenville and the O'Hare cases are so relatively recent and prominent. That it's almost like a reflex that you go to them. One of the things on your website that I found fascinating was the section on myths and water UFOs, and it really gets into a lot of the ancient text and the ancient lore. And I would really love to get into that. What's a good place to start there?
That was one I had put on brakes because all I have is Japan. Mm-hmm. I actually have a whole bunch of other ones, Poseidon and Neptune, et cetera, but a lot of the ancient myths talk about some white bearded person that comes in from the sea. They don't say by boat or how he arrived. They just say he came in from the sea and taught them farming and metals and whatever have you. So I really want to get that section built up, but I need somebody who's equipped, somebody who's studied this stuff. I haven't really been into it very deeply. So that's one I'd skip over right now. I sure would like somebody to pick it up.
What we'll do is we're about to come up on the hour break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about water UFOs and abductions.
That's good, yes.
My guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Carl Feindt, and we've covered a lot of UFO issues, but our main topic still is going to be underwater UFOs. This, of course, is Dimension X, and we are on the Shadow Talk Radio Network, and we will be right back after these messages.
This is the Shadow Talk Radio Network. Now this is the way that Paranormal Talk Radio was meant to be. You're listening to Shadow Talk with Brian Leffler, Joe the Mole Sturgis, and Scotty Stamper, the 3 wise men of paranormal radio. And
UFO studies, ancient mysteries, paranormal studies, cryptozoological sciences, demonology, extraterrestrial archaeology, temporal sciences, conspiratorial studies. These courses and more can be found at the Institute of Metaphysics. From the mysteries, knowledge. instituteofmetaphysics.com.
Have you been wondering what gift to get that special person in your life? Then you need to visit Mountain View Candleworks, your one-stop headquarters for candles, fountains, specialty foods, and much more. Just visit www.mountainviewcandleworks.com. We make your candles with mountain care.
Dimension X Radio with Dr. William Lester is on the air now, live from Atlanta, Georgia, on ShadowTalkRadio.com.
Yes, we are live from Atlanta, Georgia, and we are Dimension X on the Shadow Talk Radio Network. And my guest tonight is Mr. Carl Feindt, and we have been covering a variety of UFO topics. The main issue, of course, tonight is underwater UFOs. And, of course, the issue of abductions is an issue that makes even some of the diehard UFO researchers a little bit queasy. But apparently not. This is not the case with Mr. Feindt. So, what in the world is happening with respect to abductions in connection to underwater UFOs?
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in abductions, kind of arm's length thing, But once I started getting into cases, I'm not into cases. I don't do abduction cases. But the people I've read, Jacobs and Bud Hopkins and et cetera, I've come up with cases that suddenly one of the witnesses says, I went underwater. And then they start describing, they're looking out a window and telling me what they're seeing. Well, the first time I said, well, that is strange, maybe I should look into this a little more. Well, as it went, the more I read, up comes more and more. I've only had 3 major cases that I consider in that category. There are others who think they might have had something with water. The Betty and Barney Hill case. She had a dream about water. She was terrified, and she said she was near a lake. Well, I consider a lake a very good hiding place for a UFO.
Sure.
They can go underwater, and you'll be in the same neighborhood where you picked the witness up. So, I mean, the abductee. So it's perfect. All you have to do is put them in the craft and then zoom to the nearest lake and then bring them back again. You don't have to go out into outer space and whatever have you. So it fit. It fit, and a lot of the reasons why people are taken under wells. Like I said, I don't have many cases, but the ones that I have started going into this thing where I'm talking about the field that's holding the water back as the craft goes into the water. And they are describing the exact same field. They're talking about the water going past the windows but not touching the window. And so I'm saying, oh my God, I got a witness, first-hand witness in the craft describing the field from inside the craft. I said, wouldn't it be nice to have the CIA agent on board the craft, And I'm sure the CIA would enjoy having somebody on some foreign government staff that could pass them information just like our abductee did. So in the book, I'm going to hone in on that, and the exact same things they talk. One's a guy and one's a woman. Well, there's 2 women. One called it a tube, which in England is also the subway. The tube is called the subway.
Okay.
The subway is called a tube. In any event, what you're talking about is a tunnel. And they think they're in a tunnel because they see curved sides. It's curved around the UFO and holding the water back. And when I try to describe the wall, the guy I think said it looked like firmed water. The woman said the tunnel had soft sides. She couldn't describe it any other way but to say it's soft sides. Well, of course it's soft. It's water. The only difference is it's being held away from the craft by a field. It's kind of like having like a plastic ball around you, and you put the ball in the water and nothing inside is touched by the water. So I find it very exciting to have that in. The only trouble is that's not my specialty, so I have very limited cases to deal with in there.
Are we speculating that this field is somehow connected to electromagnetism? Because that seems to be the prevailing theory about UFO propulsion underwater, overhead, outer space, etc. Is that what we're postulating?
Well, actually, I built it that way for my diagram when I started doing the diagrams I was telling you about. I said there's something around the UFO at night. It's a ball, so I made a ball. Then I found a guy who had a magnetic field coming out of it that was, I forget his name, doesn't matter. So I said, okay, well, let me try a magnetic field, but I don't know which way it's working, which way it's rotating. So anyway, I finally got it, and I said, yeah, it's pushing the water up and out, so the field has to be rotating from the top out and then back in through the bottom. And it worked. It worked for that one set of witnesses. So anyway, in the second set, people are talking about holes in the ocean underneath the UFO. They're talking about depression of the water, not elevation or anything like depression. And it turns out when the UFO is just above the water, it's doing exactly that. It's pushing the water down and away from the UFO. And the last one was like the vacuum cleaner, because it's up higher in the air, and the field is like going back into the craft and causing a vacuum effect underneath it, and that sucks water up. And I have the greatest number of cases is in that respect, people seeing it over rivers, bays, or oceans, and it's sucking water up. It doesn't go into the craft. It's like prop wash. It's a byproduct of the field. So, I mean, the field is, I'm almost positive, electromagnetic somehow. I can't explain it. I'm not a physicist. I wish I had one with me, in the field. But I'm positive that it is some kind of super force. It's hot, I can tell you that. It's burned people, radiation burns, and cooks water, it melts snow, melts ice. And there's a whole lot of features that were revealed by this water thing. Like I said, I started this 10 years ago, just collecting the cases, and now it's beginning to pay off. It's really beginning to pay off.
I heard stories of people saying that they thought that the UFO was somehow sucking water up into the UFO, but perhaps they were miss or not quite seeing what they thought they were seeing, and the UFO was creating this spout of water simply because of the centrifugal force or the field effect or whatever. Is that we don't think that they're taking water?
No. I always compare it to prop wash. When a propeller is rotating, the air that it pushes back is not conducive to flight. As a matter of fact, it kind of screws up the airfoil. The propeller rotating is screwing into the air ahead of it. So the prop wash back is just a byproduct of the propeller. Well, the byproduct of the UFO's field is this vacuum cleaner effect at the bottom. It has no purpose whatsoever, and it's not sucking into the craft, it's sucking it towards the craft, because the electrical field is going into the craft, nothing else. Whatever else is being drawn up to it is mist to start with. The heavy water is down near the surface. And the higher up you go, the more molecular the water is becoming. Like if you're talking a tornado or what do you call it, a water spout at sea, right? The water spout, the water is at the lower part of the spout. What you see swirling up into the vertical part, into the clouds, is like molecular water. It's a fog, mist, haze, whatever you want to call it.
Vapor.
It gives the impression of, and it is spinning just like it is in the UFO. But it's not being drawn into the craft. As a matter of fact, half the time, I've got another section, as a matter of fact, it's on my website too. Where? Back. Water. Taking on water conventionally and taking on water unconventionally. Unconventionally is this water spout, which I found many cases on. But taking on water, there's actually cases where they come and ask somebody for a bucket of water, or that they've got pipes or tubes into a river or a lake or whatever, and they're sucking water up. And a lot of these other cases that are unconventional, that's where this vacuum cleaner effect is. And they're doing it in oceans. Oceans are salt water. The others are usually reservoirs where they're taking out fresh water from a reservoir or a stream. So it's two different means of collection. And why would you do it two different ways when you have this marvelous vacuum cleaner thing that you can do it with. Well, they don't have the vacuum cleaner. The vacuum cleaner is, like I said, prop wash. And they're not collecting water in that case. It's just being drawn up to it by accident.
What? One of the things I saw on your site was the effect that underwater UFOs might have on marine life. Is this doing anything to fish?
Oh, the fish. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, I had that's going to be in the book too. Joan Woodward. Have you heard of her? Joan, not
The actress?
No, not the
Oh,
actress. She's written a book from MUFON called Animal Reactions. Well,
okay.
she helped me with this. I like I said, I can put in a word into the search engine that's on the website, and I put fish in. So next thing I get every case that has a fish story in it. And most of the cases, the fish are afraid. Next thing you know, fishing's bad or fish are dead. As a matter of fact, I got right below the fish thing. I've got somewhere, no, above it, dead in the water. Those two are connected. Evidently, this electric field either, one case was investigated in South America, and they said it was concussion. It had knocked out some gland on the fish. But all the other cases, they find dead fish floating in the water. And Chris Stiles, I went up there for a conference up there once, and we went down to Shag Harbor by bus, and they had movie people doing stuff about this thing. And so anyway, he finishes up the thing, and they were just packing up the equipment, and says, oh, by the way, a week later, they had all these dead fish coming into the shore. And so Chris finally sent me the newspaper clipping on it, and sure enough, there's just dead fish by the hundreds there. And of course, this is right after the UFO event in Shag Harbor. So there's evidently either radiation, electrocution, or something else that's not healthy when you're near a UFO. As a matter of fact, one of the cases in there is dead ducks and geese in a pond. And I have 2 dead professional fishermen. So don't go bathing with a UFO.
You know, I wonder if this is connected. I don't know if you've ever seen these stories about these dead fish inexplicably appearing, just on the ground, miles inland.
Oh, well, that's kind of like Charles Fort thing with rained fish or rained frogs or rained this, that,
Right.
and the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that might be a cause from something like a water spout or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's UFO created.
Okay.
They really don't deal with any of this fun stuff,
What about
Not intentionally. That's Mother Nature at work, I think.
what about the issue? And this is kind of like a Bermuda Triangle type thing, but the idea of missing aircraft and missing ships in connection
Right.
to underwater UFOs.
Oh, I'm going to write that up in the book, too. I've got a thing about the bad part of water ufology. People who have made estimations, and I don't know if I can find it. Hang on a second.
Okay.
I really hate this. Well, the thing is, ufology starts off in 47. And
All
now
right.
here we are at 2007, 50 years later. And the trouble is we've just got our fingers wet. We really don't have a whole lot of research. And the people who were back then trying to make stories and books were hooking facts together that didn't really belong together. And so anyway, in the book, I'm going to have a chapter that's called The Negative Sides, if I can find it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here it is. Okay, Negative Sides of Aspects of Water Ufology. And in it, come on. Yeah, here it is. I have, actually, this is on my website, too, the Elatan thing on the ocean floor. That turned out to be a sponge that grows deep in the ocean, but it looks like an antenna, And so everybody's saying, oh, the aliens have an antenna on the ocean floor. And the whole thing was stupid. And the 4 of us got together and we nailed this thing. And it's in a book in oceanography or whatever it is, the biology part of it. And so anyway, we destroyed that. Then I have another one called anomaly attachment, and that's water wheels. In the Indian Ocean, 99% of water wheels, you know what they are?
No.
Okay. Think of a bicycle tire, okay? You got all these spokes going out from the central hub, right? But they're not connected at the edge. They're just spokes that go out. And they're huge. Some of them are miles long. And the first ufologists, they had a UFO water case, and next thing they're attaching, it's just like the water wheels. Well, it's not like the water wheels. Water wheels have never been seen to come out of the water. They've been seen to make circles in the water, and then somebody attaches the idea that, well, it's mysterious and it must be a UFO. It's not. Then the one you just mentioned a minute ago is gross supposition, missing ships. Nobody has ever seen a ship picked up and taken away by a UFO. No one. And yet you have these missing ships. Now, History Channel did a good episode on rogue waves, which is only recently in our history come to light. And in the 17 and 1800s, if you reported your ship was hit by a 100-foot wave, they said you're a lousy captain. You evidently lost your cargo and damaged the ship by some kind of incompetence upon your part. So they didn't want to come out and say we were hit by a rogue wave. You just said the ship was damaged by high seas or something like that, and to get away with it. But no one has ever seen a missing ship picked up by a UFO. So again, this is nothing. Honest mistakes I have in there, because I have like 73 cases from Italy of misidentifications. Now, that's honest mistakes. So somebody sees a Bowie. This was an old lady. Sees a Bowie out there, and two men in black getting on top of the Bowie. And it turns out it's two surfers, and they're getting on top of the Bowie to sit it out or something, So this is honest mistakes. I can deal with that. But then the last one is malicious intent, and that's hoaxes. These are people feeding you stories, which are, of course, already, not true. And so you've got a whole mess of junk in ufology that you got to be very careful about when you're talking about it. So that's.
Well, I remember many years ago one of these, and I'm going to say a quote documentary. They were talking about the Bermuda Triangle, and it was very entertaining. But they talked about UFOs underwater sucking ships down and firing these energy beams up into the air, making ships disappear, and all of these. And I think this is kind of what you're talking about. These kind of.
I hate to tell you this, but I was on two of those stupid shows. The trouble is the researchers who were on that program were good. Stan Freeman, Bruce Maccabee, myself, Don Ledger, Chris Stiles, and Bill Burns. But in any event, it's the producer. We don't have control of what's shown. They take our text, our faces on the show, and they take our text and they put that there. But then they run bananas all around the place, And so I didn't like that show at all. I didn't like either, and I have yet to see a good show. Chris Style and Don Ledger did a good show with a New York producer for the History Channel. It's called the Canadian Roswell. That was by the book. That was done very well. So, but otherwise, this guy that's doing it lately, he's really. I can't say anything, I guess, on the radio.
Well, yeah. No, we're not going to encourage any litigation here.
Right.
But this is something, and I remember, reading in various books, now this was something that was popular, many years ago, more so than today. But, and you remember many years ago in these books, and these magazines, that they would often have a Bermuda Triangle slash UFO connection, and it was just a popular theory in those days. But I think most serious UFO researchers today, don't really draw any correlation there with the missing ships and the
Matter of
missing
fact,
planes.
History Channel did Lloyd's of London on the Bermuda Triangle, and Lloyd's of London said you can take any triangle on the face of the earth, and they can still come up with missing ships and missing airplanes in that triangle.
Right.
So this glamorized thing all happened because of the TBM Avengers that were lost, and I think that triggered it right there. And next thing they started finding all sorts of missing boats and ships down there, so it became the triangle.
Right. Now, of course, there are legitimate stories of planes, particularly military planes, engaging UFOs up in the air.
Yeah.
But that's a different subject.
Well, I was going to include that, but I haven't gotten to that yet. There's one very well-known one, and that's Lake Superior, I believe it was. A UFO came from Canada, straight down towards Lake Superior. And, of course, they set off alarms all over the place because they thought it might be Russian, And so anyway, there was a plane, a jet fighter was assigned to go and investigate. So the jet fighter went out to meet. They were coordinated by the ground radar and its own radar. And all of a sudden, the two closed. The two became one. And then the radar blip went back over Canada and towards the Soviet Union again. They never found the jet fighter. You know about that one?
Well, yeah, I've heard that, and I mean, to me, that's one of those cases where if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, that's one of those kind of cases where how much does it take for you to understand that obviously the UFO in some form or fashion seized control of the airplane?
Well, it's kind of like you took it on board, but of course they haven't been able to find anything. As a matter of fact, here comes the hoax thing again. Some company was organized and said they had discovered the remains of the fighter on the ocean, the lake bed. And
I heard that
had
report.
Side scan radar and everything else. Well, it turned out they investigated it very well. They investigated the company. It doesn't exist. It was a hoax. So they still haven't found the fighter. So that's still missing. So nobody knows what happened to it, but it probably is somewhere down there, and just hasn't been found yet. But we don't know. We can't say for sure either way. But you can't assign the fact that it was taken by the UFO because nobody saw it visually. And the only thing you have is the radar combination of, and again, this would lead more to a UFO explanation. If that was an airplane that crashed with the fighter, the one blip being joined together, neither one should have survived. Both should have crashed. But the one blip turned around and went back over Canada. That would only be a UFO.
Right, there wasn't a mid-air collision.
Yeah, well, they joined. The two blips joined.
Right. So there were two radar signals. There were two returns, and then there was one return.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, a mid-air collision would have still demonstrated two returns, perhaps, and you would have had some kind of crash debris or some type of, indication on the ground that there was a problem. So, yeah, I mean, without saying it's proven, I think a reasonable supposition is that you have a real UFO event there.
Well, that's the way it's hanging right now, but until there's, unless we find something eventually, I mean, technology keeps getting better and better, so hopefully someday they will discover the crash one.
We're coming up to our bottom of the hour, and thus our final break at 11:30 here. So, ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight is Mr. Carl Feindt, and we are discussing underwater UFOs here on Dimension X. And, of course, this is the Shadow Talk Radio Network. We'll be right back after this break.
Dimension X Radio with Dr. William Lester is on the air now, live from Atlanta, Georgia, on shadowtalkradio.com.
Okay, Lester, Dr. Lester, I think we lost him. Give me a minute and I'll add him right back.
Hi, Mr. Feindt. Yes, hi. We had a little technical bugaboo there, so we're back on the air. And what I wanted to ask you about was this issue of old stories of sea serpents and how it might be connected to underwater UFOs. you did see that? Because I saw that program, and the way they portrayed it on TV was that, I mean, there were these flying saucers zooming along underwater. Well, I guess, one of the, part of this too is because we have, about 100 years or so of rock solid science fiction literature, going back to H.G. Wells, Mary Shelley, etc. It's hard sometimes because science fiction has given us a kind of perspective through which we look at the subject of alien life and UFOs, and some things from science fiction may actually turn out to be reliable reference points. Some of them may turn out to be just objects of human fantasy and speculation. Who knows? But one of the things that is always the subject of science fiction is the idea of an alien base. A secret alien base on the moon, or on Mars, or whatever. So the idea about an alien base under the ocean, it's kind of interesting and amusing. But can we throw that out there as a possibility? I mean, if UFOs are moving around underwater, why not? Or perhaps the Navy. Yeah, and again, I mean, it very much, the idea of an alien base very much plays into, our kind of science fiction-y view of extraterrestrial life. Of course, in all of the science fiction stories, particularly when you have, I don't know, an enemy alien. When there is some adversarial relationship between humans and aliens, there's always an alien base. that needs to be, infiltrated or destroyed or escaped from or what have you. And so it's one of those things, and it may be perfectly true. So tell me about the status of your book. Is it a finished manuscript? Where are we with this? Do you have a title for it, or are we going to keep us in suspense? Or okay. Oh, you got a long time. Now, on your website, and folks, believe me, you need to get up there because it's a boatload, pardon the pun, of information on this subject. But on the website, there is a video of a UFO over water, Manhattan Island, New York City. What's that? What is that a hoax? Is that a real UFO? Where are we with that? Yeah, I pulled it up. You know, it seems as though today the paranormal or slash unexplained phenomena is becoming very popular. Uh, it's moved into pop culture, all right? And so we have all of these programs, ghost hunters, etc. Now, there is a program. Now, I'm not going to name the program, but the initials are UFO Hunters. Or do you have any commentary on, if you've seen it, any commentary on what you've seen? or what do you think is happening?
I think it's more like hope blooms eternal. However, there is hope in some areas. I mean, France came out and opened up their files. Britain opened files. Of course, there's a lot of speculation about the real secret ones still being held up. But Britain, France, Brazil are three of the major countries that have opened their files and added more cases. So yes, I think there is more, and I'm almost positive that it's our government that's putting the shackles on us all.
Sure.
Because, I don't know. We must have some big interest in UFOs for them to be that concerned about it. Of course, they always come. Well, we ain't got much time, but there's that thing about if you meet a bunch of natives somewhere in the jungle somewhere, and next thing you know, you break out your pocket lighter, and they see you got fire in your hand. You're a god, and they want to become like you, and they abandon their civilization. So I'm sure a lot of countries are scared that if we had a superior civilization visiting us, we might abandon our power structure.
Well, that goes back to Brookings in the early 60s,
Yes.
late 50s. And basically the idea was if we found out, we couldn't handle it. I mean, that was the underlying thinking. But to be honest with you, the world has changed in the last 50 years.
Certainly has. Before, we weren't going into space. Now we're going into space. We got Mars, the moon, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're more positive about meeting people in space. The newspaper research, again, I was in 1938 papers at the time, and I ran across some scientists who said there can't possibly be life out there. Nowadays, everybody's breaking their necks to say, there's thousands of planets out there with life on it. Of course, they come along and say, well, they're all too stupid to come here, though.
Oh yes, well, one of the search for extrasolar planets has become its own kind of sub-discipline of astronomy, and they've discovered all of these planets out there outside of the solar system where, the idea that there were planets outside of our solar system at one time was nothing but the most radical speculation. Right, exactly. Yeah. And so now we do know that planets exist outside of our solar system. And so you don't even need the element of science fiction anymore to say, well, at some point, there's got to be some other planet with some other kind of life form. And it's just a matter of time. And of course, then you get into the discussion about the technology required to travel interstellar space, and the fact that we can't do it. Of course, if you have I would speculate if you have a civilization that's only 100 years ahead of us, and that's very modest,
right?
That they would be very close, if not already tapped into that technology. And then if you back up and say, what if they're 1,000 years ahead of us, or 5 or 10,000 years ahead of us, then it becomes a fait accompli. So the idea that someone is coming here, to my way of thinking, it's not only not far-fetched, but it's a no-brainer.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, just anytime I have a guest on talking about UFOs, the 2 hours fly by, and tonight has certainly been no exception. And so we have done our best to cover the issue of underwater UFOs. Our guest has been Mr. Carl Feindt, and I certainly want to thank him for being our guest and sharing his storehouse of information. Mr. Feindt, what we're going to do as we close the show, or what I'd like to ask you to do, is to please hold your line, because we want to speak with you briefly after we go off the air.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, like I said, my guest has been Mr. Carl Feindt tonight on Dimension X on Shadow Talk Radio. Please tune in next week when my guest will be Mr. Barry Schwartz, and we will be discussing the Shroud of Turin. So, at this same time, on this same network. Please tune in, not for the Twilight Zone,